So, folks, we have to talk about 2028 because, hoo boy, the speculation engines are revving up into full gear. Again, no one has officially announced that they are going to run in 2028 yet. However, we have a pretty good idea of who's wanting to throw their hat in the ring. And I wanted to cover a few different things that are coming out here. Specifically, let's take a look at first Jon Ossoff, who was previously considered to be kind of a dark horse candidate, but he has been growing in prominence because a lot of libs are liking the cut of his jib. And that in turn has fueled a rise in his prominence in Georgia. So let's take a look at this real quick.
New polling out of that Peach State shows that Democrats lead in both the Senate and gubernatorial races. In the race for the Senate, the AARP poll of likely voters shows that Democratic incumbent Jon Ossoff has a 9-point lead over his Republican challenger, Congressman Mike Collins. Ossoff also leads Collins by 20 points among independents and by 30 points among voters aged 18 to 49. In the open gubernatorial race, Democrat and former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms edges out billionaire Rick Jackson by 2 points, which is within that poll's margin of error. So
it's worth pointing out the billionaires are literally trying to run for office on their personal fortunes now. They are still having to fight for their lives because the amount of money they have is not translating into victories anymore. At least easy victories anyway. But Jon Ossoff here is running away with the election, in part because he keeps showing up in front of cameras and he keeps posting in such a way that makes people think that's a guy who's going to fight. That is a guy who is going to fight for us if he's elected president. And it's fueling his rise in the Georgia Senate race, which is also good. I do think it is good if Jon Ossoff wins that seat. That being said, he's a bit liberal for my taste. He's a bit moderate for my taste. And that's something that I think we have to keep in mind going forward, because the typical lines along which liberals make decisions when it comes to candidates have kind of started to break down. I wanted to take a look at this because that breakdown is fueling the rise in prominence for Jon Ossoff, but that breakdown is also fueling a rise to prominence for folks that are typically farther left than what would be considered possible in American politics for a presidential contender. And let's take a quick look here. This is MS Now 3 days ago. They ran this segment. I wanted to take a look at this.
Their new nominee for U.S. Senate, Troy Jackson, the former state Senate president, will face off against five-term Republican Senator Susan Collins. Let's bring in former special assistant to President Biden, Megan Hayes, and former advisor to Speaker John Boehner and founder at Blue Stack Strategies, Maura Gillespie. So welcome, ladies. Good to see you both. And Megan, I'm curious how much of a chance does this give Democrats to unseat Senator Susan Collins after the Graham Plattner episode?
I think we have a great chance of unseating Susan Collins. She's extremely unpopular. She has a 96% voting with Trump record. People are extremely unhappy with her Supreme Court vote for Brett Kavanaugh. So I think that we have a really great chance. I think that we had a better chance than we did when we had Graham Plattner of beating her. So I'm hopeful that Maine's back in play.
Okay, so more Republicans and Senator Collins herself are going to spend big money to hold this seat. Will money rule this race? Can throwing funds her way prevent it from slipping away?
Can we just stop and recognize hey, maybe we shouldn't be supporting the kind of systems behind our politics that lead to that lead to that kind of question even being asked. That shouldn't be a question that is meaningful at all when it comes to deciding who our leadership is. Who can get the most money funneled to them by billionaires is an insane that is a normalized question. And yes, Jon Ossoff is a liberal Zionist, in the same way Brad Lander is also a liberal Zionist, though Brad doesn't take money from AIPAC or anything like that, as far as I know. It's one of the reasons why John Ossoff, to me, is a lib that I wouldn't be too keen on seeing win the presidency. You know, he's far from the worst contender in the field, Rahm Emanuel, and that's, you know, worth noting. And I'm not talking about here yet who should be president in 2028. I am talking about who is kind of being set up to make a viable attempt to become president. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does.
I mean, she certainly has the war chest to be able to do that. And I do think they're going to point out the chaos of the Graham Plattner situation with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, really doubling down on him until the very, very end. And so I think they're going to be able to highlight a lot of things and a lot of people who have kind of, you know, just gone along to go along just because they want to win the seat.
Yeah, John Ossoff did vote to suspend arms sales to Israel and has called it a genocide. He's like, but he's far from the worst, but he's also like, you know, not the best.
And so standing by their politics and their political ambitions as opposed to their moral values and moral compass. So I think she's going to be able to point to that. I do think the money is going to be a big factor, though.
Okay. Well, we've got 101 days to follow this together. Meantime, Megan, we have a New Hampshire University poll which shows New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez with a slight lead over other possible 2028 Democratic candidates. But here's how.
Like, just take a look at that lineup. Like, I'm sorry. Of this list, if Bernie Sanders isn't running, who does that 6% go to? It goes to AOC. It is likely that Kamala Harris is going to throw her hat in, that Gavin Newsom's going to throw his hat in. Pete Buttigieg absolutely dying to throw his hat in. And Mark Kelly is a little bit more recent name to emerge to throw his hat in the ring. But that being said, it is extraordinarily noteworthy that AOC is at the top of this list. I find that very fascinating.
She has talked about her political future. Take a listen.
I don't think that Ro Khanna is going to be running for president, guys. Like, I get the distinct sense that Ro Khanna might be angling for, like, Senate Majority Leader or something, but I don't get the sense that he's ready to try to run for the presidency.
That my ambition is a title or a seat. And my ambition is way bigger than that.
J.D. Vance just said in an interview that he thinks you are going to be the leading Democratic candidate for president in 2028. What's your response to that?
I hope he is. That's what I'll say.
There's a big poll today showing that you are the favorite amongst Democrats in 2028.
Well, I feel very deeply flattered and humbled.
Okay, so it's still early, but does the result of this poll surprise you? And how big a deal is Ocasio-Cortez leading more moderate candidates like former Vice President Harris and Governor Gavin Newsom? Is it a reflection of the progressive momentum right now?
You know, I think a lot of it is name ID. I think a lot of it is her popularity within the party. The Democratic Party really wants a fighter. She is someone that has been fighting back on Trump and Republican policy since she's gotten into Congress. So I do think that does say a lot for this poll of where she stands. I'm not sure that this poll will be a precursor to what is to come for 28. I think a lot of those people will start to surpass her when people start actually campaigning. And I'm not actually sure she.
What's interesting here is that effectively they're saying what I'm saying, which is that the desire for a fighter is superseding the desire for like some kind of moderate, middle of the road, sensible Democrat who's not going to, rock the boat. I find that very interesting because AOC, out of all of those, she is the only one who is truly willing to actually go toe to toe with big money, with Republicans, and with members of her own party who oppose her. I want to remind everyone, she got her start in politics by knocking out Joe Crowley, I believe, who was the second most powerful Democrat in Congress. So, she is familiar with fighting the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party. And honestly, I think we kind of need someone who's willing to fight both if they need to.
wants to do it. I could see her more running for Senate. But look, this just shows Democrats want to fight her, and she is out there fighting. And I think that is reflective in this poll.
Like, this is what I find fascinating about what is shaping up right now, and exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about the window of opportunity that is available right now specifically for her. There's literally no one else in the field who is willing to commit ideologically to the fight for workers' rights, for the betterment of the American people, and who might be willing to do what needs to be done in order to reform our political system into something that isn't constantly kowtowing to billionaires, right? You know, who better to lead us towards that than like a former bartender from New York City? Like, genuinely, she's one of us, guys. She's one of us. Now, I also want to say it is very meaningful that she seemingly has the support of other major and beloved Democratic figures. You know, Bernie Sanders has been touring the country with her in an effort to pass off the torch to her. She has been working closely with other members of Congress. She has been doing the work to play the game, to build allyship, not just with fellow squad members, but also with more like moderate Democrats. She's been playing the political game, and she's been playing it very well. And so one of the things that I found really fascinating is this clip from a recent New York Times interview with Zoran Mamdani. Let's take a quick
One
look.
of the people who is rumored to be considering a run for president is obviously Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And there's been reporting that you coordinated with AOC in your New York endorsements. Do you consider that to be a partnership?
Absolutely. I consider it to be a partnership, and I also consider her to be an inspiration. I had the privilege of having been represented by her in Congress before I was the mayor. And I think she has shown what it looks like to fight for working people. And I'm excited to continue to work together because for a long time, politics has been understood as if it is about individuals. And what's so exciting is that at the heart of that partnership is a belief in the collective. And even if you think about the greatest mayor, I would argue, in New York City's history, Fiorello LaGuardia, he could not have achieved what he did without the partnership of FDR. And that dream of having partners is also what drove me to make the decision to endorse those 3 congressional candidates, because you can't fulfill an affordability agenda for the most expensive city in the country without partners at every level of government.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that partnership with FDR. Would you endorse AOC for president if she runs? Because that obviously would be a very clear partnership and alliance.
I'm excited to see what decision she makes. In terms of endorsements, the ones that I'm focused on are the ones that I've just made.
I mean, there's been some recent disagreement in the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, your party.
What is the socialist without disagreement?
Yeah, surrounding her endorsement. Do you think you would endorse her independently of your party?
Well, first I would say DSA is an organization, right. And my party is the Democratic Party,
okay.
And my organization is DSA,
okay.
And I would say that I'm still very much focused in this year, but I do believe that we all have to take a step back and appreciate what it is that she means to so many across this country, and the reason for it is the work that she has done.
You think she'd make a good president?
I think she would make a good anything. I think she's a great congresswoman, and I think no matter what she decides to do, she's going to bring those same qualities to whatever that work is.
I gotta be honest. I look at that and I read someone who is trying to walk a very delicate line because we know who he would support, right? He's not outright supporting her yet. She hasn't even announced. Of course he's not going to do that. But he's basically getting as close as you can possibly get without saying, I endorse her for president. All this being said, I find that in particular fascinating. You basically have a coalition of the most popular leftist figures in politics right now coming together behind AOC. And again, we have rumors from within the Democratic Party that she is preparing to possibly run not for Chuck Schumer's seat and a seat in the Senate, but instead for the presidency. And it is, in fact, I think, a unique opportunity for her to run and win the presidency. for the left. That being said, of course, this is where it comes in handy that she's willing to fight the Democratic Party itself and the Democratic establishment, because it turns out, yeah, there are a lot of there are a lot of elements now that have kind of migrated into the Democratic Party from the disaffected conservative circles, namely the Bulwark, which is made up of almost entirely neocons who worked for past Republican presidents prior to Trump. The vibes may be exciting, but if Democrats are going to win this year and in 2028, they must reject the DSA. If you are tempted by a Democratic socialist this year, think of what use Republicans will make of these victories and ask whether you want to do favors for fascists. The DSA is a gift to MAGA, or the socialists versus the Democrats. And I do just want to point out here, they're going to call us all communists anyway. They are going to say the worst shit, even if it's not true. They do not care. Right? I played this clip for an earlier segment, but I'm going to play it again because it's relevant.
Over. But I'm just thinking about it. This is maybe going to make news because I've never said it. I'm just thinking about now. When they take something over, it's always dirty. The sidewalks are dirty. The people are, I hate to say this, not clean, okay? The curbs are loaded with you know what? The smell is terrible. I mean, I see it happening to cities. Blue cities are all blue. They're all blue. We don't have problems with the Republican-run cities, I mean, for the most part. But they're dirty. I said, but
like, they call Biden a communist. They called the most milquetoast conservative Dems, they call them socialists. They talk about, they're like, Republicans are insane. Capitulating to that narrative already is weak, feckless bullshit. I'm sorry, I just gotta say it how it is. Like, this is weakness. Not only is this weakness, it is deliberately done in an effort to scuttle the left and figures in the left who could win, right? Like, that's what this is. They are using the Republican argument to say leftists should not win, but Republicans are going to use that argument anyway. The boy who cried communist, they've cried it too many times. Exactly, Tobin Frost, exactly. It doesn't work anymore. And like, this is like, guys, this is who the Democrats are up against. This is their major political driver right now in American politics. This is who, you know, the legacy of whom, the legacy that Democrats have to beat in 2028. Let's just take a quick look here.
The Journal's courageous reporting on President Trump's past relationship with financier Jeffrey Epstein triggered the release of the so-called Epstein files, thousands of documents that might otherwise have remained hidden from the public. And despite the president's threat of a lawsuit, the Journal published a story about a provocative letter to Epstein bearing President Trump's signature. Trump quickly filed a $20 billion lawsuit against the Journal, revealing reporter Khadija Safdar's home address. Her family had to be relocated. The Journal was kicked off of Air Force One, but the reporters continue to file revelatory stories. Please welcome the winners of the Katharine Graham Award from the Wall Street Journal. Khadija Safdar, Sadie Gurman, Annie Linsky, Josh Dawsey again.
Like, I'm sorry, this guy is grinning like a fool because he's suing the New York Times for reporting they did on Jeffrey Epstein and his pedophile sex ring that implicated him. Like, genuinely, Democrats are completely validated if they wanted to run an entire campaign about how, you know, whether it's Marco Rubio or J.D. Vance are carrying on the legacy of an Epstein-loving BFF, you know, who covered for child sexual abuse. Like, just plaster his fucking face all over every ad. This is where we're at. Who gives a fuck what these evil, vile people think? Who gives a fuck what pedophile defenders think about the Democratic Party? Screw those guys. They belong in prison.
Alex Leary, Rebecca Ballhaus, and Ryan Barber. Their colleague, Joe Palazzolo, could not attend tonight.
Like, fuck this guy. That's the woman he doxed. Her entire family had to flee her home because of this man. He's like, she won't hug me. Also, I do want to say as a side note, this is why people hate the mainstream media. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this dog and pony show to validate this man's power? You do not have to do that. Like, the best he deserves is like someone walking up and saying, go fuck yourself. Like, that's what should be happening. Why did she come to that dinner? Why did anyone come to that dinner? It's embarrassing. When people talk about how they hate the mainstream media, this is exactly why. Under a normal presidency, this is meant to be like the press do like get some jabs in at the president. It's like supposed to be good-natured fun that shows the president can take a joke. But like, that's not what this is. You're literally handing out an award for reporting on how this guy was BFFs with a pedophile who ran a pedophile sex ring. Stop clapping and laughing for him. This man is literally president because of jokes that Obama made at his White House Correspondents' Dinner. Anyway, what are Democrats running against right now? Why do they need a fighter? Oh yeah, it's because that man who is just laughing about being reported on as a BFF of Jeffrey Epstein also kicked millions of people off of food stamps. Specifically, more than 1 million goddamn children lost the ability to eat because of Donald Trump. Because of Donald Trump and the entire GOP. Like, these people are evil. Like, there's nothing else you can say. The GOP is just evil. What do you call the political party that is dedicated to starving kids in order to make wealthy people a little bit richer? There's no other word for it. It is just plain and simple evil. Like, usually the real world is shades of gray in some form, but like, frankly, the Republican Party isn't shades of gray evil. They're just out there glorifying in the worst of humanity.
But just like my presidency, the second time is always better. It's always better. And the third time will be better yet.
This is why people hate the mainstream media. Ha 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 ha! Destroying democracy so you can run a third time. Ha 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 ha! Clap, 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 clap. This is the fucking White House Correspondents' Dinner. These are the media. These are the mainstream media ghouls. What good fun they're having. And I do want to say, this is the reason right here, this next bit. You have Democrats aligned against arguably one of the most evil administrations in modern history when it comes to American politics. And then on the other hand, when it comes to moderate Dems, they're okay with it. They're okay with the evil, right? Look at this story here. Politicians want to claw back billions from ICE. Party leaders say not so fast. Even moderate Democrats want at least some guardrails put in place if they win back the House in 2026, Eric Garcia writes. After another wave of deadly shootings by Immigration and Customs Enforcement this month, Democratic members of Congress are once again talking about clawing back money from the agency if they win back control of the House of Representatives in November, but Democratic leadership is not so sure. Earlier this month, ICE agents shot and killed Lorenzo Salgado Arau in Houston and Jean Sebastian Duran Guerrero in Biddeford, Maine. That reignited outrage about the immigration agency after months of back and forth and a partial government shutdown. Now talk of defunding ICE is once again in the conversation. An Economist/YouGov poll showed American support abolishing ICE by a margin of 48 to 40%. while 58% say ICE uses too much force. And many Americans are losing their faith in the idea that most or more of the people ICE deports are criminals, with only a quarter of Americans saying so. All this makes ICE's most outspoken critics in Congress eager to shrink the agency's budget. AOC said there are options to rein in ICE should Democrats win back the House, such as clawing back money or withdrawing or withholding other money in the annual appropriations process to force ICE to spend the money down. A lot of different ways to look at it, but we cannot allow this genuinely unacceptable and irresponsible deployment of resources with no accountability to become a new floor. So AOC here is portrayed as, okay, she's the one who wants to claw the money back. She's the one out there advocating for disempowering ICE. Cool. Let's take a look a little bit farther down. But House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries did not commit to reducing ICE funding. We've made it clear that ICE is completely and totally out of control, that taxpayer dollars should be used to make life more affordable for the American people, not to brutalize or kill American citizens or violently target law-abiding immigrants, he told The Independent when asked about reducing ICE funding during the press conference last week. That's not necessarily a commitment to reducing money for ICE. Jeffries seldom makes news during his press conferences and prefers to stay on his talking points. But it does hint that Democrats might use ICE funding as leverage for some safeguards should they take back the House. Which, in turn, means Hakeem Jeffries wants to have continuing to fund ICE on the table as something he's willing to negotiate with when it comes to Republicans. And I gotta tell you, coming from a place in Minnesota where, like, we had our neighbors shot and killed in the streets like dogs, and we had like roving gangs snatching people from their homes, both American citizens, people who were here legally and undocumented, all alike. This does not fucking fly. The amount of rage in the American people and in the Democratic Party in particular around ICE is difficult to fathom, but this leadership in the Democratic Party is not catching on to how angry people are in real life. And this is one of the reasons why I think moderate Democrats are not up to the fight. They are not up to condemning and facing fully the evil and vile nature of the modern GOP. They are not up to the task of looking at that force for evil in the face and saying we must dismantle the systemic structures that make it possible for this kind of politics to exist in the United States. And that is something that I think people, when it comes to 2028, if AOC is on the ballot, I think are going to be willing to vote for someone who is eager to fight for us rather than for the Democratic Party establishment who are out there being like, I don't know, should we continue funding masked vigilantes in the streets? Should we continue funding a secret police? It's just so hard. Like, seriously, those people need to go fuck themselves. You don't belong in politics. You are not living up to the moment. And frankly, every passing day makes people in America more angry. I don't know anyone who is in DSA. I don't know anyone who is in their local Democratic Party. I don't know anyone who identifies as liberal who is not getting more angry every day by this administration, but also by the extravagant failure of Democratic Party leadership. We cannot afford more spinelessness. We cannot afford more people who will capitulate at the slightest breeze. I don't know how to stop the right-wing propagandists without stepping on free speech. There needs to be a redefinition of what free speech actually is. I mean, I think what needs to happen is we need to tax the billionaires and the organizations that fund this shit, right? A lot of the mechanisms that fund far-right media are either religious in nature or funded by billionaires, often both. Tax them into influence, you know? Tax them until they are incapable of funding these media machines. And if necessary, start taking them to court for lies. And I would also say, when we are talking about all of this, that when it comes to members of Congress, laws should be passed to hold members of Congress to a standard of truth. Because one of the things that is destroying America is quite literally members of Congress just going out and fucking lying. That cannot be tolerated. It should not be tolerated. So, we need to tax them. And we need to have punishments related to, like, spreading false information. There needs to be accountability. Tax billionaires out of existence, tax corporations so they're paying their fair share, and make them stand actually accountable for their lies, whether they're in Congress or outside of it. And I do want to say, when I'm talking about how liberals are angry, and I'm talking about this widened opportunity window that is giving rise to AOC topping a lot of these polls for 2028, it is because liberals are angry. And one of the reasons I say that is, many of you know, if you've watched the show for a while, that I like Jamel Bowie. He writes for the New York Times. He's one of the few people who works there that I actually like. He has his own YouTube channel, which I would highly recommend, where he talks about American history. And he goes over different, the full context of different comings and goings when it comes to politics over on that channel. I again highly recommend it. It's called, I think it's called This Take, if I'm correct. Takes TM by Jamel Bowie. I like it. But he put out a video 5 days ago that I just want to say, I think indicates how angry liberals are, and that some liberals are recognizing the strategic issues with the spinelessness of modern liberal establishment politicians. And specifically, I say that because he put out a video saying, broke, pack the Supreme Court. Woke, pack all of the courts. I think that is fascinating. Let's just take a quick look at some of it here, because he's spitting straight fire lately. I think if you have set up a situation where liberals like Jamel Bowie are like talking about radical restructuring of our fundamental systems in America, we're now starting to talk about how angry liberals are, well and truly.
I saw yesterday that President Trump confirmed his 50th Article 3 judge of his term, this one to the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals. This is a lifetime appointment, and the guy is 39 years old. 39 years old, and seems to be one of the worst chuds imaginable. Anti-birthright citizenship, anti-abortion, anti-trans rights, has a conception of the Constitution that essentially grants no rights to anyone but the right of wealthy men, and wealthy white men in particular, to do as they please, however they please. Perfect embodiment of Trump and everything he stands for. And then I mentioned this guy was 39 years old. He'll be on the bench for decades. And there's obviously a lot more where that comes from. He's confirmed 50 people. One response to this is to say, well, you just have to impeach them all. But impeachment, you have to remember, is a two-step process. You impeach in the House, and then you remove in the Senate, which is the sentence. It takes a simple majority in the House to impeach, and it takes a 2/3 majority in the Senate to remove. And so, sure, you can impeach these people, sure, and that's meaningful, right? It's a sanction. It's saying this person is unacceptable. This particular guy was unqualified, just a toady, a stooge for the president. No reason he should be there. But you're not going to remove them. That's basically implausible. You're not going to get enough Republican votes to do a removal, and the odds of winning 67 seats in the Senate, I mean, that hasn't happened since the 1930s, if I have my political history correct. So,
and now this is correct, right? Like, this is a real problem. How do you actually combat that? Because he's right. Republicans aren't going to go along with it, and it is unlikely that Democrats are going to win a super majority in the Senate. Not impossible, but, I wouldn't place any bets on it. Let's put it that way. Like, the solution here calls for something unconventional. And the argument he makes here is that, well, the easiest way forward would just be to pack all of these courts. And I do think that that is potentially one solution. It's also possible that we could get something like new courts created. And this is an idea that I initially got from one of his earlier videos, actually, which is that Congress has the power to create courts and to expand courts. And that power can be utilized in novel ways in order to create, courts that perform oversight of other courts. And I think that, well, that might open like a potential kind of court arms race of kinds. I'm not actually too worried about that. I think that, for example, I don't know how plausible this is, but if we're looking for some outside of the box thinking, create a court that is empowered by Congress to overturn the Roberts Court decisions from the last several years. Create a court that is dedicated to, cycling through and putting different judges on active cases that effectively then expand the different circuit courts. Or create a court that is in charge of, hey, instead of having impeachment and removal being done by the House and the Senate respectively, create a court that is built to oversee like the adjudication of impeachments instead of sending it to the Senate. There are a bunch of novel ways that a democratically controlled Congress could make some extreme changes to our court system to unfuck what Donald Trump has set up and the Republican Party has set up to be a permanently controlled set of federal circuits. One of the things we should be thinking about is stuff like that. I do want to hear him make his case for packing all the courts, though.
What do you do? What do you do about all these Trump judges? Here you should take a page from the conversation around the Supreme Court. Now, the case for expanding the Supreme Court in political terms is just that the Trump judges, the Republican justices, are engaged in lawless, essentially anti-constitutional behavior, overturning precedents with embarrassingly thin reasoning, making up
that dog is so goddamn cute, though.
Doctrines to get the results that they want. And because removing them is not really feasible, the next best option is just to put more of them on there, drown them out, essentially, dilute their influence. And you can take a similar approach with the entire federal judiciary. A thing to remember is that the only thing the Constitution says about the federal judiciary is that there shall be a Supreme Court and such inferior courts as Congress creates. Basically everything about the federal judiciary is structured by congressional statute.
Bingo! Which means it's a lot more malleable than a lot of people think. Which is kind of an exciting prospect if we are facing off with a set of federal circuits that are hopelessly packed with Republicans.
Number of district courts, number of circuit courts, number of judgeships on each circuit court. Everything is structured by Congress. Even much of the Supreme Court is structured by Congress, right? Other than saying that there shall be a Supreme Court and giving some, thin description of what its jurisdiction is, the Constitution doesn't have all that much to say. It used to be that Congress would routinely expand the size of the entire judiciary to keep pace with the population.
Who is this guy? This guy's Jamel Bowie. He's a badass, and I like him. Y'all should pay attention to what he says, because he's a smart cookie. He's not a socialist, though. His main failing is that he's a liberal. And despite that, I really like his outside-the-box thinking when it comes to certain legislative solutions to our current constitutional crisis.
In the same way that it used to be Congress would expand the Supreme Court to keep pace with the number of circuits, number of states, the population. The last major court expansion was in 1979 under Jimmy Carter. I believe the judiciary was expanded by more than a third. Hundreds of new judgeships created. Carter filled most, if not all of them, and many of those judges still sit on the bench. It's a huge part of Carter's overall legacy. Since that expansion, the population of the U.S. has grown by a third. You got 340 million people, and we're still growing. And there hasn't been much in the way of change in the size of the courts. In fact, the U.S. Judicial Commission, the body responsible for governing the courts and kind of keeping an eye on things, is constantly writing about the fact that actually we need more judges. Caseloads have grown too high. Individual judges have too much work. Cases move too slowly. So how do you...
Which I think is an interesting observation to make, and like an excellent framework to make the argument to the American people for expanding the court beyond just we need to destroy Republican influence in our courts. You know? Like that's kind of where we're at. Right? I love him too, but yes, he's very lib establishment, but he's still a real one. Yeah, he's a real one because he understands history. Like, he's very well read on history. He understands, like, the intricacies of American history in a way that I don't, and I find it admirable. The way that he understands and connects the dots. And I find it interesting, the ideas he throws out there. Oftentimes, I don't find them to be quite radical enough for my taste, because I think our radical times call for radical solutions, but this is a good one.
You deal with Trump judges in the federal judiciary the same way you deal with them in the Supreme Court. You just drown them out. Any Supreme Court expansion plan should include a plan for the massive expansion of the federal judiciary. Expand it by a third in keeping with the overall population. Create new circuits if necessary.
I think his dog is a beagle. I might be wrong.
Create new district courts. All of this is within the power of Congress. You can even take those districts and those circuits where Trump judges predominate and split them up, break them up, reassign responsibilities. Congress can't take away a judgeship, but there's nothing in the rulebook that says you can't just assign the judge somewhere else.
And you know, there's nothing in the rulebook that says a dog can't be a judge. Makes you think.
So many Republican plans for political dominance rest on the fact that the system has been static for decades. We have 50 states, we have 100 senators, we have 435 House members, we have 9 Supreme Court justices, so on and so forth. And the fact that things are static, that they haven't changed, means that if you can game the system, if you can lock in an advantage within that static system, then you win. It's hard to dislodge you. Sure, an exogenous shock might do it, but other than that, you're in good shape.
And so, like, the point he's making is if you can't win inside a static system.
Real dogs fake pause Supreme Court.
Sakate Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. Of course. Of course!
Of course!
Thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. But if you can't win in a static system, then make the system less static. There you go. Bada boom, bada bing, bada boom. We did it. That's the solution to our situation. Make it less static. Shake it up. Move it around. Make more courts. Hire more judges. Brilliant, honestly. And I have yet to hear major Democratic voices talking about this as a potential solution. But I feel like it's a pretty elegant one for the issue, for the current time, you know? I think that this is like the path forward when it comes to unfucking the court system. A solid gentleman spitting facts. Yeah, I love Jamel Bowie. I'm gonna link this here so you guys can go and pick his brain on American history. He's a good one. I like him. And also I get the feeling that like perhaps us on the left and us progressives could win him over. I get the feeling that he would respond to a solid argument for socialism. So, that being said, go give him a follow and be normal about it. Don't be weird. Sadly, you're right. I hate to go looking for a fight, but unfortunately Trump broke the Republican Party so badly that it's time to replace it with a new party now. Yeah. Unironically. Break the party and break the billionaire power that corrupted it into the state it is now. All that being said, folks, I am excited about the opportunity window that is open in front of us. And I do think that if AOC takes the opportunity to run for president, she stands a very good chance of winning, especially in the current conditions. So folks, get organized now. Now is the best time to get organized. You can join in with the effort to organize around the midterms, cut your teeth, gain some experience, and then use that when it comes to the fight that is brewing for 2 years from now in 2028. Because that is really going to be the make or break time. When we're talking about where this goes in the future, when we're talking about, whether or not we will slide back into fascism after the next administration after Trump, who decides that is going to be us when it comes to the primaries in 2028 and the general election in 2028. And we need to make sure we get people into office who understand that there needs to be significant structural change of the fundamentals of American political life if we are to avoid a backslide into fascism like how Donald Trump came into office again after Biden. It is, if J.D. Vance is able to become president somehow after this disastrous administration, the amount of damage he can do will make Trump 2 look like child's play. The amount of damage a coordinated, competent fascist could do as the president of the United States is truly incalculable. The only way that we avoid that is getting someone into office from the Democratic Party who is able and willing to combat that problem and maneuver the party and maneuver our political system towards a systemic change that makes it impossible for the way Republicans have been doing politics to continue. Full stop. And that is also going to entail a confrontation with the way the Democratic Party has been doing politics. So we need someone who is willing to fight and wrestle the Democratic Party and fight and defeat the Republican Party. And you guys can be part of that solution. So join your local Dems, join your local DSA. If you don't know where to start, join our Discord and reach out to Dragonfly for help joining your local Dems. Reach out to GamerG for help joining your local DSA. Get involved, folks, because you guys make the difference. And you guys are the ones who will make up the building blocks of a successful movement. Okay? So get involved today. If you got anything out of this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. Let me know who you think would be the best presidential candidate in 2028. And last but not least, check out ImogeneOlivia.com, gender euphoric lingerie designed from the ground up for trans femmes, tested with cis men, cis women, non-binary folks. It is comfortable, sexy, non-tucking lingerie. We just got a full restock. We got a new color. We got 2 new sizes. Go check it out. ImogeneOlivia.com. Link down in the doobly-doo. And let's keep on going.
Riverboat Deck is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube and swishy streams. All that content is bursting the scenes. Politics, dating, and plenty more.